Everyone, welcome to another episode about .NET Core, and in this episode I would like to talk about keeping your code clean when using .NET Core, because when beginning with .NET Core you usually tend to not know the difference between the C Sharp, the domain code, and the .NET Core framework, and these two usually just get mixed together, and you have this complexity of your business logic and the .NET Core framework intertwined, and it may not be a problem for small or throwaway projects or prototypes, but it is definitely a problem for long-term maintainable projects. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to bring up a simple example. It's not going to be anything too complicated, but this should basically give you an idea of how you want to treat .NET Core and your application that you're building using C Sharp. Okay, so this is a simple project I set up. At the moment, all I have is my default routes enabled and MVC added, but I'm using Razor Pages, so all I have is my layout, view start, and the index page. Okay. Another thing I have is a settings folder, which is an app settings object. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the configuration I have in my app settings, and I'm going to bind it to this app settings project. Okay, so let's go into the startup. Let's go say services, configure, app settings. We will also need a constructor. We'll need to bring in our configuration. Let's keep it at config. Make it global. Say config. We'll get section, and we'll get app settings. Okay, let's see this run. Okay, and here we go. So I have hello, I have version 1, and the thing with the let me bring up the eye options monitor is if I go ahead and change this value to 2 on my page here, it should change as well, and it does. Okay, so all good. You probably use this if you have been using .NET Core for a while. You probably bind this configuration to an object. You may not. You may just inject the eye configuration into your page, and that's fine. And you get the settings that way. So what's the problem with eye options monitor? So let me bring up this page. So in .NET Core 1, there was no eye options monitor. It was just eye options, right? Eye options is still available, but in .NET Core, they changed it to eye options monitor, right? And let me bring your attention to this blog post by Richard, and basically it's an introduction to .NET 5. So this is something that is going to be released, and .NET Core 3 is going to be released, and .NET Core is going to be evolving, and the .NET framework is always going to be evolving. And imagine if in .NET 5, eye options will no longer exist, right? And you will want to port your application to .NET 5. What are you going to do? Maybe they will have some sort of other provider. Maybe they will change the app settings to an XML, and they will have their own automatic options loader, whatever. You get the picture. Now, what will happen if you will want to port this, and you will have, let's say, 100 pages, or you will have pages and services that will have eye options, right? We have refactoring tools that might make it easier for you to change the naming, but the functionality might change, so you'll have to go ahead and change the current value to value or settings, whatnot. Okay, so what I'm getting at is that your whole application depends on this eye options monitor currently. Okay, so what I want to do is stop depending on the eye options monitor, and I want to abstract it into I want to hide it behind an interface or a factory or that kind of thing that will basically take this dependency and I will wrap it in an object and I will depend on my object rather than depend on the iOptions monitor. Okay, so if I do this, I will only have to change it in one place. And if you don't do this and you have the iOptions or options monitor spread across, or even iConfiguration spread across your whole application, you're going to be in a world of pain when you want to change it because it's like a virus. It just spreads all across. And once the moment comes to maintain it and change it, you'll be in a bit of pain. So, a general structure for long-term applications is you have different projects, so they compile to different DLLs. You can compile them separately, etc. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's add another project. And this will be a .NET Core library, and I'll just call this .NET Dependencies. Okay. Let me remove this class, and let me make a folder. Options. Right, and in this options class is what I want to do is I want to take these app settings, and I want to move them into here, right? And I'm going to leave it here. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to basically create a wrapper for this iOptions monitor. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a wrapper. What do I want to call it? Well, let's go ahead and call it iOptionsFactory.cs. Okay, so this will be our interface, and this doesn't really have to be an interface. This can be just an object, but I prefer it to be an interface for dependency inversion principle, but I'm not going to go into that. And all I want to do here is I want to get my app settings. Okay, one thing is I will change the namespace to options here. I'm missing some dependencies. Let me go ahead and run.net restore. Okay, there we go. Not sure what that was, but okay. So we have an app settings, and I just want to call this get settings. All right, and if I'm creating a factory, I might be passing in an option here like type of settings. So if I have multiple types of settings, settings for my services routing, settings for my current application, settings for, I don't know, some kind of third-party service provider, that kind of thing, I can pass in a type, and then in my implementation, I will go ahead and define what kind of options I want to resolve it to. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the options factory. And let's implement from iOptions factory. Okay, we'll implement the interface. Let's get rid of all that. Okay, so in here, this is where we want to actually import our iOptions monitor. Okay, and we'll have to add the reference to Microsoft.extensions.options. Okay, and we want to is for app settings, options, and then I will go ahead and say settings equals options dot current value, and then all I can do is basically say, right, just give me settings here. Okay, nice and simple. There is not a lot of complexity going on here. We're injecting our options into the service, and then if we now want to import something, we want to get our options in our service, we would inject our options factory rather than iOptions monitor. And when it comes time to change from iOptions monitor to iOptions or iOptions provider or XML options provider, whatever Microsoft might change it to, we go into the options factory, and we changed this class. All right, we change it to accordingly to whatever they need to, and then the rest of our application keeps working as it was, and we don't have to go into each individual Razor page, into each individual service, and change it that way. Okay, so let's go ahead and hook the rest of this up. So I will have to go into my dependencies here and add a reference to this project. And let's go ahead and import app settings. Okay, now let's go into our index CS.html page. I'll take this iOptions factory. I'll put it into here. I will also import dependencies. And here I will call... right, so we don't actually need this because our iOptions factory takes care of that. So it doesn't care about the app settings. It's no longer a generic type. So we get the settings and voila. Okay, so another thing we'll have to do is we'll have to add it to our dependency injection layer. So services, sorry, not dependency layer, but a container. So let's start with a singleton, and you want to be careful not to do it as a singleton. I will basically show you why you would not want to add it as a singleton. Okay, because let me make sure everything is okay. All right, let's run it. Okay, so here we have it running. Again, we are using our options factory, and we're getting the settings. Okay, one thing we added is a singleton. So a singleton is something that only gets created once, right? So it loads in these options, and if we change the version, we should not observe this change here, right? So you see it's not changing, so it's not updating, it's not recreating the service, right? So when you are adding this sort of service, you want to be careful and add it as scoped or transient, depend on. I'd recommend scoped, but if you need the fine, if you're sort of implementing iOptions in your middleware and you want it to actually detect change in your pre-action and post-action middleware, you might want to opt for transient, or you want to use scoped because if the options change in the pre-middleware and post-middleware, your application might crash. Depends on how you wrote it, but basically you want to be aware of what lifetime you choose for this service to change, right? So if it's scoped, the options are going to remain the same for your pre-middleware and post-middleware. So let's go ahead and run this and triple check that it works. So there we have version 3. Let's go ahead and update it to version 4. Refresh, and there we go. Okay, so simple little example. Hopefully you take away a nice little lesson about abstracting your .NET Core dependencies from your application layer as well. So I don't have it created here, but essentially what you'd have in the middle here is your business logic that shouldn't really depend on the .NET Core dependencies, but these services that do your services should depend on the .NET Core dependencies and then use the business logic. Okay, but that's probably a topic for another day. And this will be it for this video. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Leave a like, subscribe, comment if you have any questions or if you'd like to see more videos of this type. There are other. I'll probably be making more videos on this. There are other niche tricks you can do to increase your .NET Core development experience. And as always, hopefully I'll see you in some of my other videos. I put out a lot of .NET Core content. Yep, thanks for watching and have a nice day.